Good evening and welcome into the Pacers Podcast Show. I'm Kyle Newman, your host.
And I'm Rhett Hensley, your co-host.
We have a great lineup for the next half hour. We will discuss the Pacers season to this point, talk about where Indiana stands in the Eastern Conference, and take a look at the Pacers' upcoming games. But before we get to that, we have a soundbite of Paul George from last year's playoffs. Yes, Paul George, the news is official. He is coming back next month. He's looking for a return date to practice in full March 1st and then to return to game form March 14th against Boston. Pacers fans, get excited. Take a listen.
Steps back. Not as good as any of Paul George. And George. George. Shifty. Really nice movement. Also, I love Hibbert there. Just giving it back to him. And the Pacers go up 8. That's George. Sets the tone. George answers. Paul George for 3. Yes! George has an answer on the other end. George on the attack. Here's George. And George goes to Mouse. It's going to double digits. Splits the double team. And George silky score.
Well, there you have it. Paul George coming back next month. Exciting stuff for Pacers fans. We will have a segment next week dedicated to Paul George and his return. That's just to get the ball rolling with the leader of this team who has been out the whole season. And Rhett, I'm glad to have you here on the show and doing this with you. First time. This will be fun, huh?
Yes, it will.
All right. Well, let's get right to it. In this first segment here, we're going to discuss the Pacers season to this point. So the Pacers are 21-33, 9-6 with George Hill playing, 12-27 without. Pacers are 15-24 with David West and 6-9 without. However, West is the second leading scorer for the Pacers with 13 per game, behind Hill with 14. The Pacers are 18-36 without Hill and West and 24-30 with them. So clearly Indiana needs their veterans healthy and on the court to win games consistently.
That is correct. One thing that I've noticed, David West is a leading rebounder for us so far. Not Roy Hibbert, not anybody else. He's averaging 7.3 rebounds a game. That is putting up good numbers from a power forward, and he's leading the team, doing good.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. Certainly he is, and George Hill, the man's been back for only 15 games, and he's the leading scorer for the Pacers. So clearly Indiana needs George Hill and David West to be playing well like this and lead this team without Paul George. But, you know, the thing is, George Hill is shooting more as the point guard in the role right now because he can shoot. I know we've talked about that before. You like it when George Hill shoots more because, let's face it, he's not really a true point guard.
He is not a true point guard. His role, if we can pick up somebody or have, Donald Sloan or C.J. Watson come off the bench and take over the point guard position, move George Hill to the 2 guard, then things would just be rolling a lot better. He puts up numbers, as you can tell, and honestly, we need our veterans.
Exactly. Well, we already mentioned that the Pacers star leader, Paul George, has been out of the equation this season. George Hill, as we mentioned, has been out over a quarter of the season, and David West missed the first couple of weeks of this year. So with these key pieces out, it was ever more crucial that Roy Hibbert step up and lead this team in their absences. And Rhett, Hibbert has not done that, which is a large reason why they've struggled to this point. Hibbert's averaging a mere 11 points per game and 7 rebounds per game, and has only had 4 20-plus point games this year. For a 7'2", 290 center, that is rather pathetic, to say the least.
It is pathetic. It is pathetic. When you have a 7'2" center that's grabbing less rebounds than the power forward, and last year, as you can tell, Lance Stevenson averaged 7.3 rebounds a game, I'm pretty sure, and Roy Hibbert averaged less than him. Our shooting guard was the leading rebounder for the team, and, he could blame Lance Stevenson all he wanted for taking over the rebounds, but you're 7'2" big man, and you can't grab a rebound. That's pretty pathetic.
Yeah, it's troubling, and for a man that promised fans that he was going to be a different player this season with his off-season work with Kareem, he's done nothing but solidify his legacy, in my mind, as the most inconsistent big man in the NBA.
I agree.
So, definitely the Pacers are going to need him to step up, and now that George Hill and David West are back, let's see if they can get some of that chemistry of the old Indiana team that we're used to seeing play better. Indiana is 3-11 in games decided by 3 points or less, 10-13 in games decided by 10 points or more, 6-21 in games versus teams above 500, and 15-12 in games versus teams below 500. So Indiana is even struggling to win games against teams that they should win against.
That is true, but I believe some of those stats are from when our key veterans have been out, and that is one of the things that have affected our team. When we bring rookies in, say like Solomon Hill, Donald Sloan, they haven't led a team before, and we didn't have any key leaders to lead our team. We had Roy Hibbert out there that really, every time he took a game-winning shot or something like that, just totally bricked it. You got to have somebody in there that can.
I like that. Bricked it.
Yeah, somebody that can lead the team, and when it comes to crucial points in the game, they can produce. Kind of like George Hill, he came in, and I believe he's had 2 game winners so far.
I believe so. Yes, absolutely.
And that is just great. That shows that our veterans are one of the main things that we need in our team right now.
And George Hill, who has had game-winning experiences before last year, hit one against the Lakers, a big game winner at the buzzer on the road. So he's no stranger to it. He's a veteran, and he definitely has been playing well lately. So I want to talk about the bench and the other players besides the veterans on this team. So the Pacers' 2 main offseason acquisitions, Rodney Stuckey and C.J. Miles, got many Indiana fans excited. So far, Stuckey has averaged 12 points per game, but has been very inconsistent and selfish with the ball. C.J. Miles struggled early, but has really played well lately, averaging almost 12 per game, and he has had 8 20-plus point games this year. The Pacers bench is 32-22 on the year in bench matchups. This is in terms of efficiency recap difference, which is 4th best in the East. That stat surprised me because our bench has been weak in terms of getting us wins. Indiana's also needed players like Luis Scola, who's averaging 9 points per game, Solomon Hill, who was supposed to be the big Paul George temporary replacement, averages almost 10 per game, but he's been way too up and down, having only 6 15-plus point games. Chris Copeland, who's averaging 7 points per game, need to step up, and they all just haven't. And I will say that Donald Sloan has been averaging a nice 9 points per game, especially when you consider the fact that he has missed 14 games. he's been more consistent off the bench, and when he started in games in Hill's absence, he recorded 7 15-plus point games. In order for the Pacers to make the playoffs, the bench will have to play better and contribute to more wins, Rhett.
Yeah, see, Donald Sloan, I feel like he is overlooked on the team. He kind of stepped in for George Hill's absence. I believe that he knows his point guard role. He's a good passer. He can score. He gets the job done. I believe that he's just overlooked. And for Chris Copeland, I don't think he gets enough minutes. He was getting minutes at the beginning of the year. He knocks down shots. He's a great three-point shooter. And when at the end of the day, he's just not getting enough minutes.
Well, you say, I mean, we know he can shoot threes. He did that for the Knicks. I think we brought him in for that. His defense is a little weak, but the man can shoot. So yeah, there's no doubt that these players need to step up. If the Pacers are going to make the playoffs, everyone's going to have to play better.
Yes, that is true.
So speaking of playoffs, let's get into the next segment, and let's talk about where the Pacers stand in the Eastern Conference. Despite the struggles, injuries, etc., Indiana is 21-33 and only 2 games out of the 8th spot in the East. The Pacers are 11-14 at home. Away from Bankers Life, Indiana is 10-19. The Pacers cannot be content with having a losing record at home. That is just unacceptable. You have to win at home. However, they should feel content with the fact that they are hanging around and continuing to battle. Again, Indiana is only 2 games out from the 8th seed, along with the Pistons, and then Brooklyn and Boston stand ahead of them with being only 1 and 1.5 games out, respectively. The team tied with the Pacers, division foe Detroit, has a 2-1 season series advantage so far. The 2 teams just ahead of Indiana for the race for the 8th, Brooklyn and Boston, have been struggling lately. Indiana is 1-0 against the Nets so far this season, and they're 1-1 against the Celtics. The current 8th seed holder, rival Miami, is 4-6 in their last 10 games. Also, Indiana is 2-1 against the Heat this year, with 1 buzzer-beater rim-out shot by Watson at Miami back on January 23rd, away from being 3-0 against them, in a game where the Pacers were down by 21 and stormed all the way back. So the Pacers should feel pretty good going into their final 28 games, as this weaker Eastern Conference just may allow the Pacers to end up in the playoffs after all. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Being in the Eastern Conference does give them a nice bailout because the Western Conference is,
tough.
It is tough.
Every year.
Eastern Conference, that is just not a good conference. I mean, when you're hanging 22, what are we, 22 and help me out here.
Are you record?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, 21-33.
21-33. When you have a 21-33 record and you're right outside the East, or right outside the 8th seed, that is telling you that you have a weak conference. If that would be in the Western Conference, you'd be at the lowest in that conference. It's just showing you that it's a tough one. And I have a stat here that says that, I believe this was from ESPN, they gave us a 12.5% chance to close the gap to make the postseason. That number right there, I believe, is absurd, because when we have our veterans coming back and we have Paul George coming back, that right there is giving our team momentum. And even the rookies, that makes them want to play for something other than knowing that our star is going to be sitting on the bench. That gives them hope. That gives them drive. They want to go out there and produce. So I believe that number right there is just crazy, because we're going to they have potential to come back and, make the 8th or 7th even. And I think they can.
I agree. A little disrespectful.
It
Maybe
is.
the Pacers will use that as some motivation, like you say. Maybe that will be a little motivation for the Pacers to come out and again, 2 games out from the 8th spot. Miami, who we should be 3-0 against this year. Charlotte, who's tied for the 7th seed with Miami, and Charlotte has lost 3 in a row. The Pacers just got done beating the Hornets at Charlotte in a game where Indiana showed their grit and toughness and came back and won at the end, thanks to Paul George, or I'm sorry, not Paul George. Getting the men mixed up, Rhett. Thanks to George Hill, who hit one of his 2 game winners we mentioned earlier against them on the road. So to say that the Pacers only have a 12.5% chance to make the playoffs tells me that the experts don't trust Indiana in regards to their point in the season right now. They don't trust where they're at this point and how their resume has looked this year, and being so up and down. For a while, the Pacers couldn't win 2 in a row. They'd win one, they'd lose one, they'd win one, they'd lose one. So I think that percentage has a lot to do with what they've seen so far from Indiana. So coming out of the All-Star break, the Pacers just have to prove them wrong, and their schedule does not get any easier, which we will talk about in a couple of minutes. But yeah, the Eastern Conference is not a strong conference, and you said it, Rhett. It's going to be tough, but the Pacers are playing good basketball as of late, 6-4 in their last 10 games.
Yeah.
So what do you see?
Well, we're only 2 games. They're only 2 games back from the 8th seed, and Charlotte, they have Kemba Walker's out, and did you say they were 6th or 7th in their conference? They're 7th.
7th in the East.
So with Lance Stevenson not producing well, I believe that they're going to keep dropping down, and then I feel like we can take over once Paul George gets back and we're in the groove. I believe that they can take over and push themselves to get the 7th or 8th seed.
Yeah, no doubt. Pacers fans certainly hope for that, and it's an interesting scenario for the Pacers, because 12 games under 500, most teams would not be in the playoff hunt, and we are approaching, coming out of All-Star break, 3/4 of the year of the NBA season, and again, that's why I said the Indiana should feel pretty good for where they currently sit. So it will be interesting going forward.
That is true.
So speaking of going forward, let's get into our last segment here and take a look at the Pacers' upcoming games. In February, they will face the Sixers on the road. Then they will be home to Golden State. Then they will go to Oklahoma City. And finally, they will close out February with another matchup against division rival Cleveland. So let's talk about the 76ers first. This game is in 2 days at Philadelphia. Indiana is 1-1 against the Sixers this season, with the only win coming at home for the regular season opener back on October 29th, 2014, 103-91. This was a game where George Hill and David West were out due to injuries, and Hibbert scored a rare game-high 22 points. Since he averages only 11 per game and may be the most inconsistent big man in the NBA, as I mentioned earlier in the show, that is a long time since the last win against the Sixers because the second game, the loss against Philadelphia, came back on January 10th, 2015 here at Philly, 93-92. Another close game that the Pacers lost, which 3-11 in close games again, 3 points or less. This was a game Indiana should have won, as David West finished with a game-high 28 points, but he missed a game-winning jumper. Michael Carter-Williams hit the game-winning layup. So what do you think, Rhett, against the 76ers? This is a game the Pacers have to win with their tough schedule.
That is right. I mean, we have the 76ers coming up, and this is, well, it's not good for them, but it's good for the Indiana Pacers. Michael Carter-Williams is out. So
good news.
Yes, that is great news. And even with him being in the lineup, we were averaging 6 more points per game than them, and they were allowing 3 more points per game than us.
Good stat.
Yes. So I believe with Michael Carter-Williams out and our veterans back in the lineup, I believe that we can take over and hopefully, break the barrier and going into the next games with momentum against the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, the Warriors.
You mentioned that. Golden State on the 22nd, so 4 days from now, on Sunday, the Pacers will be taking on the best team in the NBA, where Indiana is 0-1 against the Warriors so far this season. They are 42-9. The loss came back on January 7th at Golden State, 117-102, where Klay Thompson led all scorers with a monster of a game, 40 points. David West finished with 16 to lead the Pacers. This game, Rhett, will test the Pacers and where they are at after the All-Star break. Even though it's at home, this team looks like they could be the team representing the West in the NBA Finals.
Oh yeah, no doubt. The Warriors, they're a 3-point shooting team, no matter what. They have Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. It is
who won
something.
The 3-point contest? Splash City. No surprise there.
Yeah, and we're just they're gonna have to close out in the 3-point range. We're gonna have to just tough defense. We have the anchor down low. I mean, he's still good at defense, Roy Hibbert. And then we got the bad man, David West, and hopefully...
He's a bad man.
Exactly. And we're going to have to just hard defense. Just close those 3-point shooters out and make them drive. I mean, we have a 7'2" big man for a reason. We're going to have some block shots. Just make them come in.
You mentioned that. Roy Hibbert being the big man, and he is a rim protector. Roy Hibbert does a good job in the paint for us. He averages almost 2 blocks per game, which may not sound like a lot, but even if he's not blocking shots because of his long, wide frame, he does create a mismatch when players try and drive on him because he's so long. So I agree. Roy Hibbert is going to have to play like a big man, tough, like shoving LeBron down when he goes to the hoop. That's
exactly.
That's the type of toughness that is the Indiana Pacers. That's been their identity. Defense leads to offense. Absolutely, the Pacers need to play big down low, but against a team like the Warriors, though they do have good big players, David Lee, down low, they are more of a team that will get out and run you, and they will pull up behind the 3-point arc and put you out of a game quickly. So you have to defend the 3-point arc like you've never defended it before.
Exactly, and with Indiana Pacers, they're not a running team. By that all means, Roy Hibbert, you always see him struggling up the court. He's got to push it. He's got to grab rebounds, and he's just got to take off. I mean, they can't have the slowness, or they're going to get taken over.
Yeah, Roy Hibbert. Sometimes he looks like He looks like he just got out of a swimming pool, and then got out of the swimming pool, and then got out of the swimming pool, and then decided to do a workout, and got on a treadmill, walking with it at a 10% incline, and he's sweating like a pig.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So he has to get back in the pool to cool off. Yes, he is not a graceful runner. You can slide a piece of paper under his feet when he jumps. It is something where he has to play tough. He has to play big. He has to create problems for the Warriors when they drive, because let's face it, Golden State, their players can get to don't let their game deceive you. They can get to the hoop. Steph Curry is quick, and he constantly is putting up crazy layup shots, becoming more like a point guard at the one spot at times, like a Derrick Rose. So
last year, Klay Thompson hit a game winner on us down low with a turnaround. I was at that game, and that was...
Were you now?
I
Go
was.
ahead and brag about it.
I was, and that was a game that was devastating. I mean, I would not think that Klay Thompson was going to hit a turnaround on George Hill, but hey, he did it, and they can play down low. They're quick.
They can do it all. That's why they are the best team in the NBA. They can do it all. There is no doubt about that. But Indiana can play with the best of the best. They've gotten a few wins so far this year against the better teams, and that was without George Hill for the most of the season, and David West without being out the first 2 weeks. So this team, this bench, everybody involved can play, and they can. And when they are playing together, they can go out there and compete with the best of them. They have proven that before. They can get big wins against the best of the best. I will mention, as a side note, head coach Frank Vogel for the Pacers has the most technicals in the NBA. I found that a little amusing because
I love it.
I love it. I do too. I love it. He's a guy who you don't expect that from, because he carries a cool demeanor, but he can fire up the guys. He can fire them up, and with the way the season has gone so far for Indiana, he has needed to. So
exactly.
That is very interesting. Well, let's get to their second to last game of February. On the 24th, 6 days from now, next Tuesday, they will play at Oklahoma City for the first matchup of the year with the Thunder. This is a team who is also fighting to get into the playoffs in the West, and they are hot lately. They're riding a 3-game winning streak. Durant and Westbrook are back healthy and playing well together as usual. So this will be a tough road matchup. Not to mention, Russell Westbrook had a little fun in the All-Star game this past weekend, getting MVP honors with 41 points. So I think that they are playing well and clicking right now. What do you see in that game?
Kevin Durant, he rested up over the weekend, and he's got more time to rest up. So I feel like he is going to be, better from his injury. So that helps the Thunder team. So I feel like we're just going to have to stay on Durant. And he's so lengthy that it's hard to stop him.
It is. It's tough to stop that duo, really. And Oklahoma City, this is a place on the road. They may have the best home environment in all of the NBA. That is a tough place to play. And they have such a lively crowd. This would, again, 3 games here right out of the gate, with the exception of the 76ers, which Indiana should win. Golden State, Oklahoma City, and then the Cavs. Very tough games for the Pacers, so they better be ready to play their best basketball of the season with just over a quarter of it left to go to make that final playoff push. And again, we mentioned the final game of February will be another matchup with the Cavs. This will be on February 27th, which we will preview on next week's show because that takes place after next Wednesday. So that about wraps it up. We had a great time here on our first show. We hope you enjoyed. To recap, we talked about where the Pacers stand in the season at this point. We talked about where Indiana stands in the Eastern Conference, and we took a look at their upcoming games. Thank you for tuning in to our show. Feel free to leave any comments and feedback. We will be back at it next Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern Time.